gases we'd have released if we'd burned gasoline in the first place.
Europe mandates the sale of biodiesel fuel made from vegetable oils. To supply the European market, companies in Indonesia and Malaysia have cleared vast tracts of tropical forest and replanted them with palm oil trees. Several species are in peril, such as the orangutan.
The orangutans love palm seedlings, and so they come out of the forest and eat the seedlings, and the adults are killed and the babies are orphaned.
So, more hungry people, more emissions, deforestation, but ethanol eases our pain at the pump, right?
The ethanol mandate is costing us at the pump. It's adding and not reducing the price of gasoline. Mixing ethanol into the gasoline supply raises the price once everything is taken into account. That includes things like the lower fuel economy one gets with ethanol-blended gasoline.
What strange times we live in. Politicians condemn high gasoline prices as an outrage, yet many push for climate bills that are designed to make gasoline more expensive. So if you want to have some fun, next time you encounter a politician who advocates capping CO2 emissions, just ask, do you think gasoline prices are too low? Will your plan lower or raise gasoline prices? Some big corporations call for caps on CO2 emissions. Supposedly, this proves such policies won't harm the economy. In fact, all it proves is that special interests can make windfall profits from energy rationing schemes. Remember that $5 trillion loss the Lieberman-Warner bill would inflict on the economy? Well, that's only half the story.
The Lieberman-Warner bill also enacts a huge transfer from the consumers of energy to groups that are picked out, special interest groups that Congress would designate. So after America has lost $5 trillion in income, there'll be another $5 trillion taken and transferred from energy consumers.
In the UK, major power producers and big oil companies reaped billions of dollars in windfall profits under the European emission trading system in just the first 2 years. What passes for climate policy today would fleece consumers, perpetuate poverty, and shackle our economy. Does this mean we should just ignore global warming? Do nothing about it? No. It means we should devise smarter ways to make people safer in a warming world. When people worry about global warming, they mostly worry about existing problems like famine, malaria, and coastal flooding that a changing climate might aggravate. We know a good deal about how to solve those problems, and the remedies cost a lot less than abandoning fossil fuels. We should tackle those problems directly, using proven, cost-effective methods, rather than try to address them indirectly at much greater expense by restricting energy use. Consider malaria, which kills 1 million people a year in developing countries. The British government, using IPCC emission scenarios, estimates that a warming of 4 degrees Celsius could increase annual deaths from malaria by 3.5% in the year 2085.
On the other hand, if we have a malaria vaccine, or if we develop more effective insecticides, or bed nets that are impregnated with insecticide and we can keep these mosquitoes away, these things would be useful and they would be effective regardless of what is the factor behind the malaria, whether it's climate change or some other factor. Malaria vaccine doesn't care what portion of the malaria is due to climate change. It's going to solve it regardless. According to the analyses that have been done on the Kyoto Protocol, the Kyoto Protocol would reduce climate change by something like 7% between now and between 1990 and 2100. So if the Kyoto Protocol were to be implemented, fully implemented, including by the United States, then the maximum reduction we would get in terms of malaria would be 7% of 3.5%. That's like 0.2%. Okay. So the Kyoto Protocol, which costs $165 billion per year, is going to reduce malaria by 0.2%.
And if we attack the whole problem with proven anti-malaria methods?
According to the United Nations Millennium Project, we can reduce malaria by 75% at a cost of $3 billion. So compare $3 billion for which you get 75% reduction versus $165 billion for a reduction of 0.2%. There's no contest.
The same analysis applies across the board to all the problems global warming might exacerbate. Take extreme weather. Kyoto might reduce average hurricane strength by a few tenths of a percent in 50 years, or it might not. Either way, Kyoto's impact on hurricanes would be too small for scientists to detect. We could protect many more people at less expense by improving building codes, evacuation routes, and emergency response systems. For developing countries, the best climate protection strategy is economic growth. The faster they grow out of poverty, the better able they will be to solve the underlying problems that global warming might intensify, which leads to an obvious question. How can we help them conquer poverty?
Probably the best way to do that is to trade with them, to work to remove trade barriers, both internal and external, to get rid of policies like the common agricultural policy, for example, in Europe, which keeps African agriculture out of European markets. They won't be as vulnerable to any potential changes in the climate if we allow them to get richer.
So, hitting them with carbon tariffs is the last thing we should do. But what about global warming itself? Should we do nothing to stop it or slow it down? Because global warming isn't the rapidly approaching doom Al Gore says it is, we have time to develop zero-emission energy technologies and deploy them when and as they become affordable. Bjorn Lomborg, a Danish statistician and environmental researcher, recommends that instead of trying to negotiate a Kyoto 2 with even tougher targets than those Europe is struggling to meet, the world's governments should all commit to spend 0.05% of their GDP to develop non-emitting energy technologies. This would cost about $25 billion a year, 7 times cheaper than Kyoto and many times cheaper than a Kyoto 2. Global warming is not a planetary emergency. To create the illusion of a crisis, Al Gore repeatedly crosses the line between fact and fiction, science and speculation. There is no known way to make deep cuts in U.S. CO2 emissions over the next few decades without also making deep cuts in our economy. Banning new coal power plants means banning the most affordable source of new electric power. It could also create an energy crisis. Mandating a carbon-free electric system in 10 years would fail dismally and set a world record for government waste. Energy rationing schemes would transfer trillions of dollars from consumers to special interests. Fuel economy mandates can kill by making the average car lighter, smaller, and therefore less safe in collisions. Biofuel mandates may actually increase CO2 emissions and, by inflating food prices, threaten the world's poorest people. Banning coal plants in China, India, and other emerging economies would trap millions of people in deadly poverty. Using proven methods to solve underlying problems that global warming might aggravate could save many more lives than Kyoto-type policies at far less expense. The best climate protection strategy for poor countries is rapid economic growth. On a personal note, I've been analyzing public policy in Washington, D.C. for more than 20 years. I have never seen an agenda so lacking in justification, with so great a power for mischief, captivate so many influential people, the way this global warming agenda has. We're still at the baby steps of this agenda, yet already climate policies have increased world hunger, fueled deforestation, inflated energy prices, and enriched special interests at consumers' expense. The time to demand more reasonable policies from our leaders is now. Don't be another lemming walking off the cliff of policy peril. Save our prosperity, and we can really improve the state of the world.